Hello and welcome everyone back to the second AMA that we've done on the sales management and leadership track. Really excited to have these three sales savants, can we call them that, all together in one place to answer all the questions that you have. So I can see a bunch of people trickling in now. Quick housekeeping, kind of run through the format. So we've been collecting questions, through our sales management and leadership channel, and we teased out some of the best ones. And we're gonna kind of kick off with those questions, wrestle with them a little bit. But I do want to draw your attention to the Q&A at the bottom as well. So if you have burning questions that are things that you are currently dealing with in your role, we would love to wrestle with those probably nearer to the end, unless there's some really, really good ones, then I'll sneak them in there. And secondly, it's always way more fun for myself and our guest speakers when we know who we're kind of hanging out with, who we're rocking with. So there's a chat feature. If you don't mind going on, introducing yourself, your name, your company, title. It's way more fun, so we can say hello. But without further ado, let's get into it and do a really quick intros. Hopefully, if you're on this AMA, you probably know these three. But super quick, Becc Holland, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Do you have we can see all your amazing accolades here. Do you have the quick one sentence? Let's call it the superhero origin story of Becc Holland.
Yes, the one sentence. Hi, everyone. I'm Becc. I'm the head of sales over at Chorus. My superhero origin story is I am actually originally from Texas and cut my teeth in sales as a account executive selling mechanical construction projects actually originally. But I think the most interesting thing about my background is this last sentence. I just want to pay attention to critical thinking, data, bachelor, Jack Dorsey, Taylor Swift, and Anna Wintour enthusiast. It's all about a mix of you want to think about KPI systems all day and then come home and crack a bottle of wine open and watch, Keeping Up with the Kardashians, for instance. So.
I love it. I love it. And anyone joining us, if you can go deeper on this Jack Dorsey thing in the Q&A, so I can ask some more questions about that would be perfect.
Of course. Leads, whenever everything was going on with COVID, I was waiting for him. I'm like, someone's going to be the first to do permanent work from home. And of course, my boy Jack Dorsey came to bat and
he got you, and then just started kind of a cascading effect.
Totally.
All right, excited to pick your brain as always, Becc. And next up, Ralph Barsi. Ralph, welcome, brother. Good to have you.
Thank you, Scott. Welcome to everybody else on the line. Thanks for joining us today. I love doing this stuff. In short, I run the inside sales organization at Trade.io in San Francisco. I've been in sales over 25 years, so I've seen most of it, not all of it, but I'm simply here for all of you. Hopefully I can shed some light on areas you might not be thinking about or areas you are thinking about and want to inquire about. So really honored to be here with Becc and with Matt. I love them both, and I'm looking forward to it.
Let's do it. And last but not least, Matt Cameron, welcome.
Hey, Scott, good to be here. So you can check some bullet points there, but I think the most important qualification I have for being on this panel is the bottom one, is that I was told once, I was recommended as a speaker at an event, and the line in the email was, yeah, great guy, and the people love his accent. So pretty much that's the value I'm bringing here today. I'm a New Zealander with an Australian twang, so I'll do my best.
I love it. I love it. All right. So like I said, don't be shy. Say hello in the chat. And what I do want to quickly do, so these are recorded, so we're going to send this out after. But what I want to quickly do is get a pulse. And I want to do a quick poll. And let me launch it. Which best describes your current role? So we are in the sales management and leadership, but that doesn't mean that you're all sales managers or leaders. You might be aspiring leaders. So curious here, that's going to kind of help us inform some of our answers and know what to speak to. We'll keep that rolling, get those answers in. We'll do 3, 2, get those answers in, 1, and we will end it. All right, so we have the vast majority, 29% coming from frontline sales management. That makes sense. 25% sales leadership. So we've got 54% are like, managers and above. 17% coming from AEs. 4% SDRs, just looking to level up and get their head in the game. And 13% sales ops. 4% sales enablement. 4% customer success or marketing. All right.
Cool.
Let's
Welcome.
do it. Welcome, everyone. And let's keep rolling. Let's kick off the first question. We'll pull this directly from the Sales Hacker community channel. Okay. Say you use Chorus or Gong to know what provocations, insights, and talk tracks work for specific buyer personas. How do you take that insight and deploy it to a large sales team consistently and effectively? Becc, I'm going to have to start with you because you are currently at Chorus.
So that's a good question. I thought it was interesting that we were leading with this, but I mean, there are 3 different topics in here that I see: insights, talk tracks, and then buyer personas. So talk tracks to me is more so like objection handling when someone counters and says, I'm not the right person, or, send me an email, or, I don't have budget, etc. Buyer personas, I think everyone, typically has anywhere from 3 to 4 buyer personas that they're predominantly selling into. But long and the short of it, I think that the main goal here of any, and I hate product pitching, so it's making me uncomfortable to even talk about this, but I think that the main goal of deploying something like Chorus or Gong is going to always be quota attainment, usually for sales leaders, right? It's like no one buys it just for, fun's sake or because they want to throw money around. They buy it for quota attainment. So when it comes to scaling something consistently and effectively, I think what's really important in terms of buyer persona pitches is that you are understanding for each buyer persona what is the differences between what they care about in relation to my product. I'll give you an example. We sell into at Chorus sales leaders, SDR leaders, sales enablement, sales operations, and revenue leaders, all very different in what they actually care about from the takeaway. But I think what's important is that you put together a talk track, you deploy it, and then you can map it to conversion of, okay, let's say Matt's using one talk track, Ralph is using another talk track for both for sales enablement, Scott's using one for sales enablement, and then measure it to conversion of who's booking the most meetings and taking that piece as a correlative piece. I want to be full disclosure. I think that causation is the piece that everyone is after, but correlation is typically what you get from a tool like Chorus or Gong. So, I mean, we have a bunch of different variables, whether that's, are you asking engaging questions? Are you, talk time, longest monologue, et cetera, that we can map in terms of correlation. But I think, what would be really interesting would be like some kind of regression analysis, for instance, on like, what are the actual factors that you can say that can cause a conversion into a meeting. But the best that you can do now is you can basically drill down into all these factors, map it to your CRM data of who is the best in terms of quota attainment, and then trying to draw common themes off of the people who are winning the most often and what they're talking about and not talking about, and then replicating that onto across the rest of your team.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I love it. Asking for a friend. What do you mean by regression analysis?
Okay, so this is actually really interesting. The MLB does this. They want to basically predict how to get into the World Series and win the World Series. And so they basically start to map out a bunch of, to not take it too technical, a bunch of different data points of what can cause what. Of like, if I put this person over in left field and I choke them up, what is that typically going to cause for this batter that's coming up? And so a regression analysis is basically, if a statistician went into all the different variables for your business, or in general, the more general that you go, the less behavioral change you can basically cause. But basically looking for some kind of correlation or causation between a factor and the outcome of that factor. So, typically you want to do something that's called, what is the name of it? But it's basically an analysis where you only change one variable and you keep everything the same. And you want to see if that causes a different outcome. So really, really in-depth to do. And we're just cutting our teeth in terms of sales tech. Like we just started, recording 4 or 5 years ago, and now drawing insights from that. And that's a piece of that data. But I think what would be really interesting is if some kind of vendor, wink, wink, could go into depth and cause, like, everyone wants to know the $1 million question of what do I say to send me an email to cause that to turn into a meeting. And so I think we're just cutting our teeth in the brink of that, but we need to take it a little bit further in terms of, finding out what behaviors on the phone can actually cause someone to take a meeting or close that deal, and then publishing according to that business. So very, very different for every business, different segment, industry, time of year. Something like COVID could affect it. But I think I personally believe it's our responsibility to start doing that, within the conversation intelligence industry, to better prepare people in sales conversations of knowing what to say, or the types of things to say, and the technique behind that to cause someone to salivate over your product.
I like it.
Question for you, Becc. So the latter part of that question asks, what are maybe best practices for deploying it at scale?
Yeah.
I know you don't want to pitch, but is it a good option to kind of bounce that idea off of a customer success team at Chorus or Gong to get their insights on, how their largest customers are deploying insights? Is that a viable option?
It's an option, but I don't think it would get you after the root of your goal. To scale anything, from my perspective, you have to have a prototype first, and then you have to learn how to speed up that prototype, right? So take outreach as an example. When I was doing personalization at scale, I'm like, what's all the things you could personalize on? What are the best, outcome buckets for those? And then how can I work those factors into a sales engagement platform like outreach to scale it? So, I think we're at an interesting crux in the industry. I hate to be like a booger, on this, but, I think we're at an interesting crux in the industry, where we need to be monomaniacal about holding ourselves to the standard of, within sales tech, providing information to our end users of what they could do better to cause more conversion, because that is the claim, and that is what everyone is after.
That's right.
And so, I don't think we're there quite yet as an industry, and it's certainly not your typical average everyday blow. Like, they haven't done some deep data analysis on what exactly to say and when, to cause the thing. But I think that our heads in the right space, and we're just starting that journey. So at best in practice right now, I'm always going to claim, for better or for worse, best house on a bad block. Like, we need to get better. Like, sales reps aren't hitting quota, SDRs aren't hitting, we need to get better, tighter, leaner, meaner, and be more data driven with what we're doing so that we can help out the sales industry. So, best in practice, it's like, well, it's best in practice today. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good practice, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't keep plugging to make it better.
Yeah. I had a quick one. I've had this problem with global teams that are distributed. And so assuming based on the question that you already figured out what the best practices are through using, Chorus or Gong to figure that, get that nailed, we can monitor whether they're doing it or not. But the question is, how do we get everybody consistently doing it? And what I've seen is that the modern learning management systems allow you to hold a cell phone in front of your face and record a pitch or record an objection handle or whatever. And what I like about that is not that they're going to do it once and get it right. Because what happens in reality is everybody wants to submit something that looks good, right? The dog walks behind them, they do it again. They stutter, they do it again. They say they do it again. And to do one recording, they'll do it 5 times, which is way better than any other mechanism I'm seeing. And then we gamify it by, giving small prizes or whatever to the top 2 or 3 examples, which then end up in our learning management system for our onboarding. But I really like that. I saw it work at organizations like Salesforce and Yammer and global organizations. And I think that's a really good way to scale it.
I like it. Great strategies. All right, that was question 1, everyone. And Becc, I think we're going to need to get you a glossary of terms as separately. Monomaniacal, we got regression analysis. I love it. For a good example of regression analysis, everyone go watch Moneyball, Brad Pitt, and Jonah Hill. That was a good understanding of it. All right, question 2. Ralph, I'm coming at you with this question. All right. Hey, Becc and team, it's a well-known fact that managers have to deliver unpopular approaches or tasks to the team. The growth of quotas or lead gen for account managers. I wonder, how do you manage this when you have to deliver bad news or get people to do tasks they don't like to do?
Yeah, well, this isn't a popularity contest, number one. So we're at work and we're here to work hard and we're here to move the needle. Secondly, I think it's important, and what I've seen work over and over again is when leaders in the organization talk about what life will be like if we don't make this change, if we don't increase quota, if we don't, employ this project or initiative, et cetera. Also, what's worked is when you leverage like Simon Sinek's golden circle and you start with the why. Explain very clearly and as transparently as you can as a leader why we're doing this in the first place. And oftentimes that means just tying it to the company's mission or the team's mission, or if you know the individuals on your team well enough to tie it to maybe their personal or professional mission, that's going to pull them towards the goal versus push them towards the goal, which is really, really important. So it's also just, reminding everybody that they are a contributor, a stakeholder, and a leader in their own right in the organization. And when people start to believe that they are an owner, they'll hold themselves accountable, they'll hold themselves to high standards, and that's when you get everybody flying in formation. So those are a couple examples that come to mind just based on experience.
I think those were great. Getting people to think like owners, starting with your why, not a popularity contest. Matt, I'll ask the same question, a little bit different off of the not a popularity contest. How do you manage as a leader this, need or want for your team to like you, right? Versus execution. Mm-hmm. How do you think about that?
Yeah, there's two parts to my answer. I think the first one is that think about being like a parent. Parents, you need to, you want to be loved by your children, and you need to set them boundaries so they know how to stay safe and to feel secure, right? So and so from a leadership standpoint, the best leaders I've seen are respected. Right, so people trust that they will do the right thing, and I've got there's another question that comes later. I really want to dig into this a bit more on, but like a parent, so I want you to like me, but more than that, I want you to respect me and want to impress me. That's the key thing. I want you to be motivated for me to go, oh my goodness, that well done, that's excellent. Because if you get that, then people will work with you. And then secondly, I want you to trust that everything I'm saying is for your own benefit, right? This is a good outcome for you, and trust my judgment on that. And a good example that I think Ralph brings up is you talk about increasing quotas, right? And being an owner and the mindset, but sometimes people can't connect that directly. And so I will, not that you're wrong, Ralph's absolutely right. I just extend that concept to the one of a halo effect. If you're working for the next Salesforce, the next Slack, the next Yammer, the next Box, all of the people who are alumni from there go on to do great things. And many of them, quite frankly, didn't do anything spectacular, but they get the halo effect of being part of a successful organization. So if in the short term, I'm going to make less money because I think that my quota is too high, I say to folks, yes, perhaps. However, look for the big picture here. You want to be part of a success story so that when we exit, when we have this thing, you walk away with that badge on your CV, on your LinkedIn profile.
Mm-hmm. Great point. I love the line of, have your team want to impress you. I think that really resonates with, the best leaders I've ever worked for. You had that feeling. That's what you wanted to really do. All right, let's move on to question 3. All right. As SaaS has moved deals over the last 2 decades to more of a land and expand strategy, I agree with that, versus selling maximum contract value up front. What models for team structures and compensation do you recommend for AEs, AMs, and CS? I think it's a fantastic question. Becc, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah. First of all, I think this is a really good question, because I think how you pay someone and how you metric them and is how you motivate them, right? I have seen a myriad of different models. Some of them are, the AE has ownership for 6 months and then the CSM has ownership. I think what's important is that you pay people in a way that helps them drive the goal that you want the business to drive. Right. So the goal is that we have the maximum amount of revenue possible. Right. And so with land and expand, I think I've seen a lot of models fall short is they'll marker the AE on the initial land and no expand. Or I've seen them say the AE is responsible for this bag. And even when it renews, a contract that renews, they still have the onus, comp, et cetera, and quota retirement from that deal. So I think what's important from my perspective, if you want an AE cracking into deals that are going to have a really good land, but more importantly, a really good expand, I think that you need to measure them on any kind of new ARR that comes from that deal. So if I don't have an account manager, let's assume for a second that I only have AE and CSM. I think a lot of people are scared of double paying people. I give someone for a CSM who has a certain quota and they can retire that quota through renewal and expand. And then the AE can retire their quota off of initial land and expand, but not renewal. So it causes your AE to say, I want to hunt the kinds of opportunities that I can get new ARR off of, but then they aren't sitting in their chair relaxing because they just landed LinkedIn and that's going to pay them out for the next 6 years. If I do have an AM, if that's within the strategy, and I think a lot of companies, I think it's post 300 people is when they start to incorporate a real, cross-selling team, then I typically would recommend that, again, your AE is measured off of, or they can retire their quota off of initial land and expand. Then AM is responsible for cross-sell only, expand only, and then the CSM is really focused on renewal. So both of those models can really cause them to work together on a team where they work together as a team where they need to, but then also be very accountable to their own metric, that no one's sitting in their chair and basically incurring comp because of someone else's effort.
I think that's a great structure. And just to clarify, so new ARR for the lifetime, is there any cap on that? Is that 5 years, 10 years, or that's just for the lifetime of the that you're working together?
If it's AE and CSM, I would say new ARR, I would hold them to it. Not recurring ARR, but it's like, okay, I want my account executive and my CSM, if I have no AM, to be working as a team to continually cross-sell into that account because it's faster. So your AEs will start to get into the mindset of not only am I hunting after the accounts where there is a big expand, but then once I'm in the account, my deal isn't done. It's quicker for me to expand than it is to go hunt someone else. And so from the business perspective, it's companies, live and die on ARR, right? So it doesn't matter if that comes from necessarily one company or if that comes from 50 in your portfolio. So I try to encourage through the comp model to get AEs, CSMs, BDRs, et cetera, to do the kinds of behavior that's going to take money into the door. So new ARR, whether that's cross-sell, whether that's upsell within the account, whether that's to a different department, et cetera. I've seen AEs and CSM then really pair together because the CSM retires part of their quota from the expand, and so does the AE, and they're very different quotas, but now all of a sudden they're working for the common goal of how do we sell into, let's take Oracle, for instance, or LinkedIn. How do I sell into marketing solutions and talent solutions? Because I've already sold into sales solutions. So I have the CSM who's worried about the renewal and keeping the person happy, but they're also salivating off of, not only do I want to keep this customer happy, I want to keep them so happy that all the other departments, are interested in the deal. So, I think what's important is that the AE, again, is not measured on recurring ARR, right? Because you want them to continue to hunt, whether that's within their current account or whether that's within new accounts. But I do not believe I've seen a lot of I get the theory behind it, but I've seen a lot of account executives land one big client, have the CSM do the work, and then they expand, or a renewal, et cetera. And then the AE all of a sudden doesn't want to do any extra work because all their comp is coming in from that one deal, that they did initially. So I want to keep everyone motivated to continually push the needle of the revenue, in their respective functions for the total funnel.
Another way to think about it is incentivizing on adoption and usage. So to your point, Becc, you pay them X for landing the deal, but in the scenario where you have multiple business units now to acquire new ARR from, you pay Y for that and get them going on that. But at the same time, don't let them bail on that initial sale. And they should be kind of in cahoots with their CSMs in getting the adoption and usage rates up.
Right.
And once you drive that type of interlock or that level of interlock between CS and AEs, what happens is they start setting an example for the rest of their organization on, how teamwork looks, what it looks like.
Yeah.
Can I springboard off that? Yeah, I think that one of the things I worry about is CS is a loaded term, right? Depending on who the leader is and what their background is, because they could come from professional services or a commercial management background, and so it could be that the CS person is professional services oriented. It could be that they're a coach that get more adoption out of our product, or it could be commercial account management, right? And it depends. So the first principle for me in terms of making that decision about what the AE gets to do is it a single sale that organically grows through good adoption, in which case the CS could lead it and the AE gets the hell out of it? Or is it actually like Oracle, where it's multiple brand new sales every time with a warm introduction? And the thing I see people failing on all the time is they give somebody who doesn't have that enterprise class complex sales motion skills in CS, call them an account manager or a CSM, and say, we need you to expand in this account. But it's basically like 25 brand new sales with a warm intro. So that's something we have to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great point. And I'm going to tie this next question in that came in from the chat because it's also kind of compensation related. And Ralph, I'll go with you here. In general thoughts, what are your general thoughts on tying a percentage of ARR from meetings set from the SDR to their variable comp plan? Skin in the game concept.
It depends. Whether if your organization, is more of a consultative sale versus a transactional sale, and the sales cycle is 12 to 18 months, I don't think it's really beneficial to consider comping SDRs. However, on a much faster sales cycle, it might make sense, to give a fraction of a point or a point, whatever the comp model looks like today. I think it might make sense. In the meantime, for that consultative approach, I would recommend just really revisiting your accelerators in your comp plan and maybe establishing a point system for meetings that you get for the C-level versus VP director versus something lower than that. You just pay, depending on the persona. And then if the deal moves its way through the pipeline, going from stage 3 to 5 to 7, et cetera, perhaps there's a little bump throughout the progress in the funnel versus the win. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of levers you can pull with respect to it. It's a great question, and it's a common problem.
Yeah. And Ralph, can you walk me through, I don't disagree with it, but can you walk me through your thought process of why it makes sense when it's faster deal cycles and it doesn't make sense when it's 12 to 18 month deal cycles?
You have to keep in mind, the average tenure of an SDR could be anywhere from 12 months to 24 months. And if you're, selling largely to the enterprise and let's say it's a much longer sales cycle, some of those deals are, 18 to even 24 months. And more often than not, the SDR is not even in the role by the time that deal closes, let alone in the company. So they may get a great opportunity that ends up becoming closed won a year and a half later, but they didn't go on to be consistent performers in the SDR role and are no longer there. Or they didn't want to pursue sales and went into another business unit altogether within the company. There's a number of variables as to why it doesn't really make sense. It's also the larger organization you're overseeing, the more administrative work is done on the back end from your ops team, finance, et cetera, to pay attention to all those payouts.
Makes complete sense. All right, let's move on to question 4. Matt, this one's coming at you. How has coaching and training changed, if at all, given the rapid adoption of video during calls as opposed to just audio? Have you adopted any new processes or tools since we all went fully remote?
I don't think I'm the right guy to answer that because I don't directly coach a team. So why don't I throw that to one of the other panelists?
I'll probably defer to you, Becc, for coaching, but I can tell you right now, there's a lot of different tools that you could consider investing in because we are more in a video world. So, for example, invest in a Logitech HD webcam. I think they cost $150 tops, and you're in high def. Put it at eye level, so you're not looking down on all the people that are talking to you. You're looking right at them. Invest in a ring light. I think those cost $120. I can share some links in the community thread on the right gear to look at. This was a gift, this USB microphone from a good buddy of mine who's a podcaster. But you gotta be seen and heard clearly. This is a new world. We can't visit people in person anymore. I see a lot of salespeople today wearing baseball caps, T-shirts. They're in sweats. Some of them are literally laying in their bed or sitting up in their bed. It's just a complete disaster. So button it up a little bit, sharpen it up, because you're not just representing yourself, you're representing your company, its brand, you're representing everybody on this call in our beloved profession of sales. So represent us well.
Yeah. And on that note, Ralph, I'm going to quickly, my closet's right here. I'm going to quickly change, throw on a collar. I'll be right back.
Yeah, we'll wait. It's okay.
All right, here we go. No, that's all great point. Becc, anything else? I imagine Chorus was, very used to video before, COVID hit, but any changes that you've made since going, fully remote?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of changes that I've made, but I want to dial in on the video, piece of this, because if I had to guess, I think why this person is asking is, has it enabled a new function for us? And I think, over cold calls, et cetera, whenever you enable video, you can tell a lot more about what a person is thinking, right? And to the smart rep, they can either call that out or they can use that or leverage that in the conversation to get after what the prospect's really after. So, and I'll give you a good example. We are trained from a very early age to ask questions that aren't the real question. I ask you, Scott, what time is dinner, and you say 5:00. And what I'm really asking is, can I have a snack before then and still be hungry for dinner, right? So we are trained from a very early age to ask questions that aren't the true question. And especially in the buyer-seller community and kind of dance that's going on there, you want to hold back as much information as you can, especially when you're being sold into, and you don't want to open up necessarily all the things that are going on behind the scenes. And so I think how you build, one of the cruxes of building rapport with your prospect is by coming in with an idea of probably what's going to matter to them and probably where they're at in terms of stage of business, et cetera, struggles, pains, where they're excelling, based on your research, but open to the idea that that's a completely false narrative based on what they convey to you. And I think it's your job to understand, what are they thinking and how can you finish their sentences for them, almost metaphorically, not physically. And video gives you more of an opportunity to do that than just someone over the phone. So I want to be able to read someone with their body behavior. Are they sitting back? Are they crossing their arms? Do they have a furrowed brow? Are they typing? Are they doing something, during the call? And so I think video enables you to understand that and enables you to build more of a relationship than just something over the phone. And so how I leverage it, I've seen a lot in the sales community. We almost have, I don't know if you can think back to whenever you were younger and you thought there was a monster out there. And so you pull your covers over your head. It doesn't delete the reality of the monster being there, but you can't see it. And I think a lot of time as salespeople, we do the exact same thing. We don't want to ask those tough questions because we don't want to know the answers. because we're scared of the answer and what's behind the curtain. So I enable my reps using video to ask those tough questions because it's better to understand something up front. So I think it was David Sandler back in the day who said the 5 most important minutes of any meeting is the 5 minutes after you leave the room and they turn to their peer and they say, "What do you think?" And then tell the ungated truth. And so I think it's extremely valuable for a salesperson to be able to shatter through the noise and do what I call an elephant in the room of like, hey, an example is typically we get the objection of like, hey, I'm running into a meeting and it's like 11:17. And so I have the reps counter with, hey, can I level with you? I've been hearing I'm running into a meeting a lot recently. And I get the feeling that's your polite way of saying, go away, you annoying sales rep. Did I get that right? We use the same thing for an email, and it's a polite pattern interrupt where they're like, yeah, you caught me. And it's like, I get it, and we can counter from there. But video, I know there's a long monologue, but video enables you to better understand what your prospect's thinking, so that hopefully you can deal with it on the spot, so that you're having the conversation about what's actually at bay, not about a false objection, not about a narrative that you think is true that maybe isn't. That enables you to help understand what your prospect is thinking more, so that you can build rapport with them by enabling them to know that you can guess what they're thinking and you can guess what they're going through. So you'll probably be able to be that attentive in the sales cycle and post-close to get them what they're after with your product.
Tons of gold in there. Matt, how long till Zoom releases? How many years, like a body language score? You can see there's like a little meter on the side. It's gotta be coming.
I'm always thinking about that of like, what are they doing? And can I, like Clearbit is a good tool that even tells you when they're fluctuating between screens, when they're doing that, so that when they were paying attention. So I'm like, it's all about reading them. The best salespeople have the best, they have good instincts. And they can read people. So video is a part of that. But
and there's still a lot of people who they're averse to the video. They won't even turn it on. Even though it's a video call, it will be an audio call because they won't turn on their camera.
Is a way that I counter that a lot is if they're not on video and I want them on video at the very beginning of the call, say, "Hey, Ralph, I can hear you, but I can't see you."
Nice.
And then I'll stop and then they'll turn their video on.
Yep.
Like, let's play like gentlemen,
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so true. I mean, I look at even like my personal, if I have someone over the phone and whatever the meeting is, whatever the outcome I'm trying to drive, I know I'm at a serious disadvantage if we're not looking at each other. Like it feels like I'm at a 50% disadvantage when that happens now. So anyway, all right, moving on. Yeah, it was a good one. Okay, let's go. Okay, so this is, I recently implemented your KPI system. Becc, this is yours. And point system for target incentives, quality versus quantity of meetings. As a kicker, we are paying 2% of closed ARR on deals that come from their meetings. Do you see any downside to this? We kind of went through this already. Well, it doesn't promote a repeatable behavior per se. They feel like they have skin in the game. We kind of covered this. Becc, any final thoughts on variable comp based on closed one?
I was thinking when Ralph was talking, I get the theory of this. But what I've seen it drive is, SDRs might get this bonus money on the back end, but it doesn't drive the behavior that you want. What people want is buy-in into the sales process in terms of qualification. So they do that by saying it's a 2% kicker. And I won't bore you with the myriad of reasons. There's a couple that I will mention, like Ralph said. BDR 10 years short, and like, especially if you're selling enterprise and you're giving a 2% kicker on a deal that's going to take 2 years to land, heaven forbid expand, and you're giving this to a BDR where the more enterprise that you go, the shorter the sales cycle of like, I won't mention the company, but it was like a 6-month churn. It's like the idea and the theory is there, but I don't think that it drives what you're really after and the mindset. But I've seen BDRs do, if you're like, hey, you have a meeting quota, an SQO quota, and then a 2% kicker, all they care about or all they think about is the meeting quota. Not even the SQO quota. Of like, that's in there, but the 2% on the back end, it's just kind of paying someone money for behavior that they didn't intend necessarily to do. So I get the theory of it, but in my experience, it could just be mine. It doesn't bring any heat in the moment, which is what you're trying to drive. So if I'm going to pay someone out for something, it's going to be for that behavior that I'm trying to drive.
Yeah. And we won't beat this one too much, but Matt, you did have an interesting point that you chatted as well. Do you want to quickly run through your thoughts?
Yeah, just in the context that we're seeing a lot of SQOs accepted because I know my AEs and they love me, and at the end of the month they'll flip it for me so I get paid. I would put a proportion of their comp on reaching a stage that we know is meaningful. In a very short sales cycle, it might be a proposal delivered stage, never on the outcome, because if you're tied one-to-one to an AE and the AE is shit, then that's not your fault, right? But if someone sent a price to somebody, we know that you did exactly what you should have done. You found a good opportunity, we sent a proposal, and so I would do that. But I only use it in the context, to Beck's point, I'm not paying you for stuff I don't care about. But if we see that happen, and I've seen it, I'm sure you've seen it, where the SDRs are killing it, but the AEs are not, and all our metrics are where they should be, it's because they're usually accepting nonsense deals. So that stops that behavior.
Yeah,
Preach.
I think that's a fan.
Couldn't agree more.
Point.
Preach.
Okay.
Yeah, Matt, spot on.
All right, we'll move on. Next one. All right, Matt, I'm going to go back to you on this one. I have been in sales for 10 years in a variety of industries, but most recently, I accepted a position as an AE for a software company. How is software sales different from other types of sales, or is it?
The shit show.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll assume it is actually software. We install it as opposed to software as a service, and there's a mild difference there. But the net of it is this. I think if you're going to be successful in software sales, you need to make sure you understand the depth of technical and ecosystem knowledge that you need, right, to have a sensible conversation, because you're dealing potentially with a business buyer and then the stakeholders in technology. And if you sound like an idiot in front of them, then you better have good sales engineering support. You know, you got to learn that Ajax is a programming language and not a cleaning product. And then secondly, if you do have software, you need to be really good at understanding project management and professional services, because you've got the implementation and you need to be able to explain with credibility what happens after they sign the contract through to the end. So if I were you, depending on the nature of your product, I would do the former around technical ecosystem, and latterly get boned up in terms of the glossary of terms and sit with professional services and understand deeply what it takes to get things implemented and what the key risks are. Because it sounds really, really good to a buyer if you say, look, in our experience, if these 3 things are true, then you're going to have a successful implementation, and here are 2 risks you should be aware of. That's the only big difference I see. Oh, last thing, get very familiar with master subscription agreements, because they'll be very different. So terms like escrow, what does that mean? And liability clauses, so that you can be better equipped to have those early negotiation discussions before you bring in management and deal desk.
All great points. And if it is SaaS specifically, they're talking about in this one, we do have an excellent glossary of SaaS sales terms kicking around somewhere on Sales Hacker, so you can brush up on those too. Ralph, anything to add here? You've been in SaaS for quite some time. What's the difference here?
Yeah, well, I think not much. I think Matt, again, was spot on. He really nailed it. I think don't lose sight of the fact that it is sales at the end of the day. So it's critical that you're listening for and helping solve whatever the critical business issues are. Matt alluded to this in his comment as well. You have to be a great orchestrator, making sure that you're grabbing the right stakeholders throughout the process, pre and post sales. And get really familiar with the ecosystem. Again, is spot on. We all know that the proliferation of applications these days is like a fire hose. There's got to be 8,000 just in the sales and marketing world alone. So get acquainted with how they're categorized, what value or not they're going to bring to the enterprise, et cetera.
I do want to add a couple of things in here that I've seen, because I sold mechanical construction projects formerly, and then I came into SaaS, and it was quite a different world for me. I would say the 3 biggest differences for me, at least this is just my experience. Number 1, the hockey stick of close for quarter is much more egregious in SaaS, meaning everyone closes close to end of month and end of quarter. And if I had to guess, it's because of discounted pricing. Like that's more normal in SaaS than, in any other landscape. But the hockey stick pricing or hockey stick of close, let's call it that, during the quarter is much more egregious in sales. I have seen people be more critically thinking on whether it works or not, whether it achieves the outcome that they're after. And third-party review is much stronger in SaaS than in any other industry that I've seen, of like, people want to know behind the scenes and they want to call their peers and they want to understand what the actual use case is behind this thing. And I think because we've done a good job of building a website and not having a product, in SaaS, of like, okay, all the glamour's there, but the outcome isn't there. And so I think people are much more, let's call it critically thinking. I would say almost cynical as to whether, what's behind the curtain and does this actually work? Does it break? What's the security look like? What's implementation, et cetera, than ever before. So those are the biggest differences to me in selling. And I feel like the buyer is much, less, they're more impressed by what's cool, flashy, new, quicker, leaner, meaner than in other industries. So I had to transition my mindset from, okay, we've been a company for 35 years and we've always done business because, I know Bob, Bob's awesome, like our kids go to school together, et cetera, into a mindset of like, what's the new lean, mean, clean way to do something? Because people like Zuckerberg or whoever, got us into the mindset of, can you do something faster and more effectively through the flick of a switch or a button or an idea? So those are the biggest differences to me as a seller, especially on the peer-to-peer. Like G2 Crowd doesn't exist for selling HVAC units. Right? It's like it exists for like outreach and sales love to see like what this looks like post implementation.
Anyone's entrepreneurial on the call, you should go start that review site. I bet it would blow up. All right, let's move to question 7. Ralph, I'm going to go with you on this one. In a period like we are in with COVID, how do you balance the focus towards execution of sales goals with the empathy that we are selling in the context of hopefully a once-in-a-lifetime event? To follow up from that, how would you approach performance management of people struggling to make significant progress towards results-based metrics?
Whoa, big question. There's a lot of different avenues we can take on this. So I'm going to try to stay brief and cogent, and then I'll defer to my colleagues here. But first things first, be empathetic, be human-centric, be sensitive, be mindful, be selfless, regardless. Whether this is a once-in-a-lifetime event or not, that's the way you should be selling anyway. So I think it's really important, so important, in fact, that it could go in an OKR. It can go in a plan on a page as a SMART goal, for example. It could be an internal initiative for your team that this is the way we're going to approach the market. This is how we're going to speak to people. It's how we're going to help them solve their problems and create a culture around being that empathetic, service-oriented team that you would want to be served by. That's first and foremost. Secondly, performance management of people struggling to make significant progress towards results-based metrics. It really comes down to, first of all, ask yourself as a leader, how well do you know the people on your team today? How often are you doing skip levels with them and really getting into, why they're working there in the first place, what it is they're trying to accomplish in the near term, midterm, long term, and why? What they think are some areas of improvement that they could be working on, and what do they think they need help in and from who? I think when you start working with people by answering those questions with them, it's much easier to talk about performance management with them because you can remind them of the career arc that they are trying to shape by being at your organization and on your team. And, 99% of the time, people who have to have a performance management discussion, they're in their own way. Oftentimes they have excuses that it's COVID, that it's a seasonality thing, that it's a problem with the product, there's a problem in the industry, but very rarely will you hear those salespeople put themselves on the excuse list. So I would really implore the leaders on this call to have those one-on-one conversations frequently with the team to sincerely get to know them and what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And you can mitigate these performance management talks across the board.
Mm-hmm. I like it. Matt, anything to add on top of that in terms of empathy or
Ralph hit it on the head with focusing on the human element. So I love everything he said. The only thing I might contribute is that I had an NBA performance coach come into my team some years ago, and he said, we only hit 46% of the shots that we get in, which could be devastatingly emotionally destroying your confidence if you thought too hard about that. So I would say at all times, and in particular in these times, celebrate and focus on the process, not the outcome. A basketball player can control everything until the ball leaves their hand. If they do it perfectly and it doesn't go in the basket, we don't worry about that. We focus on them doing the process perfectly. So right now, what I'm saying to all the sales leaders is, focus on how your people are executing. And if they're executing to the plan and doing it perfectly, but they're not getting the sales, then something else is the problem. Maybe it is COVID. And so focus there. And by the way, celebrate the process, right? So that we can keep our motivation up and high and say, Sarah nailed it on that call. She did the playbook. It was perfect. Did we get the, we didn't get the sale, but we're celebrating Sarah.
I like it. Celebrate the process. All right, I've got another one. I'm going to go quickly to the Q&A because this is a question coming live. I want to make sure we answer those ones. Becc, I'm going to go to you on this one, and we'll try and keep this quick so we can get a few more in. What skills would you look for in an SDR selling a product with a super short sales cycle and relatively low deal size?
SDR?
Correct.
I mean, I'd hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I almost look for the same thing, and regardless of for an SDR. Now, for a sales rep, enterprise, you need much more technical acumen, et cetera. You need to come into box with a network, et cetera. But for an SDR, the number one thing that I always look for, regardless of product, et cetera, is accountability. Accountability for their success, accountability for their failure. And then I would say number two for me is acumen, their ability to pick up processes, technique, instinctually read things, adapt in the moment, et cetera. But I think accountability is what sets people apart. I was talking to a buddy yesterday who knows Jennifer Tejada, the CEO over at PagerDuty, and he had worked with her before, and he called her deadly on the call. And I said, what was so deadly about her? And he said, her ability to creatively think outside of the box, like not take best in practice for best practice. Of like, there's got to be a better way, and I need to be open to that. And then he said, and then outlining the plan of execution and accountability against that plan. He said, she ruthlessly holds people accountable. So I think if that inherently comes to you, especially at the stage of SDR, when you're younger in your career, of like, yes, I'm going to take this training from my manager, but I'm going to find a way to be successful, whether they train me or not. Like, I'm going to find someone to train me for free. I'm going to get to the right mentor. I'm going to get to the right decision maker, because my success in my career is up to me. Like, no one's going to step aside and say like, oh, okay, you're Jack like, step aside. You can take this spot as a CEO of whatever, Twitter, Square, whatever. Like, you have to fight to get there. So, and I'll leave with this, or end this answer with this. I was actually watching, oddly enough, true to form, the documentary for Taylor Swift this weekend. And she finds out on the phone, after her Reputation album, she finds out that she didn't win a Grammy. And the first thing she says is, I just need to make a better album. I just have to make a better album. That's what I got to do. She didn't say, the judges are bullshit, or this is rigged, or it's because of, whatever happened with Kanye West, or et cetera. Her first instinct, as hard as it was to say, I just need to make a better album. And so I think that is the one key trait that separates the boys from the men, if you will, in my mind, is they're going to say like, hey, I messed up here. This is what was on me. And I'm going to be in control of my own destiny within my career. So that's the one thing I look for regardless of sales cycle or product sophistication.
I love it. Dropping some T-Swift. I like it. All right. Let's sneak one more in. All right. And Matt, let's go with you on the, well, this one, there's a lot going on here. Okay. Some questions. Restructure our SDR team. What advice do you have for management regarding compensation and motivation during this pandemic? How strict or lenient should managers be with KPIs, MQLs, SALs during this time? Kind of talked a little bit about performance management already. Tips of the best framework for onboarding programs and continuous training during SDR's tenure. Let's tackle that one, Matt. Let's talk about onboarding during this time. There is companies still hiring and onboarding. What is kind of best practices you're seeing, how to pull that off effectively? Because it's very different, particularly in the SDR role.
Well, it's hard for small companies, but the short answer is this. You need an infrastructure to support it. So you need to have a structured learning management system that allows people to go through all of the competencies that you've identified that people need. So to start with, you need the foundation of the infrastructure. It's going to cut your time in half if you have Chorus or a Gong with the best practices there, and they can lay it out and go through it. They need a Sherpa, so then they need somebody that they can go to because they're going to feel so disconnected. A little bit like the buddy system on steroids is what I'm seeing. And what I'm also seeing is people share the load. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday might be my onboarding, and every day I have a different Sherpa who's there to check in with me and answer any questions I may have. Certification, of course, and then video evidence of that. So I've heard how we do the pitch. I've recorded my pitch and I've submitted it. And then the beauty of the fully remote, it's very, very easy now for me to ghost listen in on a whole bunch of calls. So I'm seeing that. And just the very tactical tip I'm seeing people do is they'll log into a call, they'll change their name to meeting room number 7 and go on mute. And so you appear as meeting room number 7, right? So you can be a part of that call if you want to, and then do a follow-up afterwards. The other key thing I would say is this for onboarding. It's true always, but helpful in these times as well, is if you can ask the rep that you're ghosting to send you the call plan in advance so that you can listen to the call and analyze it and then discuss it with them afterwards, you're actually getting the benefit of the new person learning and the existing person getting coached back. So you said you were going to get this answer or this action and you didn't. Why? Let's learn from that, blah, blah, blah. And then lastly, making sure that there's some visual representation. This should always be true, but particularly now when you don't have someone you can tap on the shoulder, a visual representation of the onboarding that I'm going through and the specific and key metrics to success that will get me to my number in 3 months' time. What I mean by that is knowing that at the end of month 1, I should have had X many conversations happen, month number 2, I should have X many opportunities, so forth and so on. So they have a little joint, follow the bouncing ball to success along the way.
Perfect. Tons and tons of tactical advice there. And this whole hour was incredible. We didn't get to all of the questions. We went deeper rather than wider on them. But the cool thing is they're always available. Join the community, join the sales management and leadership channel. You get direct access to these 3. We will be doing these, more of these monthly. So make sure you stick around. And of course, Ralph, Matt, Becc, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time as always. And look at this you see that little love text that you guys
cool.
got?
I like that.
Awesome. All right. Have an excellent day, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us and asking such thoughtful questions, everyone.